Hey buddy, so is unit test a burden? Because whenever a developer has to write a unit test in the code, they think that it is a burden. But is it really? So we are going to see once we complete this session that it is a burden or it is really useful. But before that, let's focus on why even we need a unit test. Now I'm going to throw you one example or one scenario. Think to yourself, you have joined a new company, or maybe in the existing company you have moved to a different project which is very new to you, maybe technology wise, maybe domain wise, anything. Now that application is a big application. That project is an enterprise application and it has like thousands of classes, thousands of files. You have been assigned for one small task where you have to modify some of the additional logic in one of the method. So when you make a change, you always will get worried that my change may break some of the old logics, right? Or may it crash any of the existing logic. Now, how you will make sure that your changes are not going to break any of the old changes and you are out of this danger? Over here, unit test is needed. If you have a unit test written before, you can make sure that you will run the unit test and everything is green, then you are 200% confident that your changes are not going to break any of the existing logic and you are safe. So that is where unit test is going to be used. Now, what is unit test? Let's focus on what is unit test now. So go on the name. Meaning of unit in English is small piece. So unit test means, so you are going to write a test on small unit, small piece in your big application, right? So that is why it is called unit small test. You can call it small test or you can call it a unit test. So unit test is a standard name in the programming world. Now, what are the other benefits we can receive, right? It has been considered that if you are writing unit test, it may slow down your delivery, but is it really? So if I talk about that now, that may not make sense. So what we will do, we are going to implement that step by step, and at the end of this video or maybe between this video, we will talk that is it really that time consuming or going to make your delivery very fast. So let's go ahead and talk about all those stuff. So we are going to use this application today, which is console application, which has this library, which have all the logics, right? And over this logic, we will write unit test. And we already have a one unit test library added. For sure, we are going to use, but we are going to use it at the end. Let me show you how you can add this project from scratch. So what all we have to do, let's go ahead over the solution, right click, add new project, and over here you will see MS test, that is Microsoft default test, but we are not going to use Microsoft default test. We are going to use XUnit, right? So if you want to go for XUnit, select XUnit. So let's go ahead, select it and say next, okay? Name anything, right? Name any project. So I'm not going to change any name. I'm going to use the default XUnit test project 1, which is this solution is providing me. Let's go ahead and create. Okay, now it is fine. Okay, here you go. So this is class, right? If you see, this project has been created. Now, since you have selected that XUnit, that is why you don't need to install any of the library externally from the Nugget package, right? If you go to dependencies, you will see inside the packages, here you go, XUnit, right? So just select the XUnit and your XUnit test project will be ready. Okay, perfect. Now this is how you can create. Now let's make sure this application is also running, because it's possible that you could face some issue. So what all you have to do, so this is very important, this fact. If you won't mention this fact like this, then it won't be your unit test. So for sure, on top of your method, you have to use attribute fact, or there are other attributes, theory also. So we will talk little later what fact and theory is, but to make sure to make your method as a unit test method, you have to make it fact. Okay, now let's see, let's put a debugger and let's see, even if it works or not. So right click and you can say debug test, right? So when you want to debug, say debug test. If you don't want to debug, directly wanted to see the result, then you can say run test. So let's go and say debug test. And let's say if it works or not. So it says, okay, something is happening. Yep, something is happening. You see, we can see the breakpoint, right? So that means it is working fine. Okay, so XUnit is doing everything for you. When you select from the solution, you don't need to install any of the third party to make your application running, right? Okay, now this is good. Let's go to our existing unit test where bunch of logics has been already written, right? So let's go there. Okay, here you go. Now let's talk about fact. Okay, so before fact, you see what we have done here. We have created one method which says password valid, right? And if I go to one of the service that I have created, so this is here you go, not here, we have done validators. Yes, inside validator what we have done, we have created one class, and what it says, it just validate the password, right? It receive one input as a string, then there is a regex expression has been applied, and it check if that password is accepted by this method, by this regex expression or not, and at the end it return result in true and false, right? So that is a very small logic. Okay, now I wanted to perform a test on this. I wanted to write unit test on this. Okay, now let's go ahead, let's close this. Okay, let's go ahead. So what we are doing here, we have just created one method which says password valid, right? Now on the test, on the unit test, it works on 3A principle. 3A principle, this is very important. One is arrange, the very first A is arrange, second A is act, and third, the last A is assert, right? Okay, now what arrange is? Arrange is something, whatever you wanted to initialize, whatever you wanted to set up, you can do that under arrange section, right? So before you call the actual method that you want to test, you have to prepare the data. That is something called arrange the data, right? So that is something arrange. Now act is what? When you actually going to act on that method, right? You wanted to test that valid method in the password validator service, in the password validator class. So that is something called act, right? Now assert is final testing. The result that you receive, on that you wanted to make sure that result is valid or not, you will say assert, right? So 3A. So now what we have done here, you see we have created object of that password validator, right? This password validator class, and what we have done, we have created one variable and assigned one value, and in the act we are calling that method, right? And this method need one parameter, which is this password, right? And that's why we have done that under arrange section. Whatever initialization was needed, that was done under arrange section. Now once we have this result from isValid method, we are doing assert. Now let's debug this and let's see how it works. Okay, so let's put a breakpoint here, and right click and say debug. Okay, when I say debug test, let's see how it works. Okay, so it should be soon here in the debugger section. Come on, oh, here you go. Let's say F10, here you go. The object is created, the password is set, arrange is done. Now it is going to act, right? If I say F11, here you go. It is inside that logic where service is, right? Okay, let's go further. Come on. Okay, so we have passed one value, which is this is password and sign of exclamation, right? And the result is valid, true. Right? That is what the logic is written. Now here we are checking assert.true. So this is important, assert. So what I'm expecting, whatever the result it should always be true, right? If the result is false, this is valid is false, then my unit test will fail. If the result is true, then my unit test should pass. If I say F10, it pass, right? Now let's just stop this, and what I will do, I will manipulate this value, and I will break this application, right? Now this is plain password, right, which don't have any character, any special character, and that is what this logic is checking, that it should have at least some special character, right? Then only it will return true, otherwise it will return false. Okay, now it should fail, but assert is still expecting true, right? Now let's see what will happen. Okay, let's say right click and debug test one more time, and let's see what is going to happen here. Okay, so come on unit, come on debugger. Okay, here you go. Okay, F10. I'm not going to go inside this time, this validator. Let's go forward. Okay, is valid should be false. Come on, yeah, here you go, right? Since I have made some wrong input, my logic is saying that this password is not valid. Now this unit test should fail, right? Now if I say F10, it should break. Here you go. It starts throwing the exception. Here you go, right? It is inside exception. So that means your logic is failed. The unit test got failed, and you see now it is red. And if you click over this, you will see it is going to give you the clear message. How much time it has taken? Duration was taken 24.8 seconds, because we were inside the debugger point, otherwise it would be very less millisecond. Okay, the message is the password, this input is valid. That is fine, because this is what we have displayed here, message, and expected was true. Why expected was true? Because we were saying assert.true. This is what we were expecting, and what was the actual value was false, right? This was false. That is why it says I failed, right? And here you go at line number 25, So this is going to help you to give you clear message what fail and what pass, right? Now let me fix that error. Okay, and let me show you. Let's say debug. Okay, and let's see how it works in green case when it is pass, right? So here you go. Let's execute. I don't want to debug this time. Here you go. This is green now, right? If you click over the green, it says duration 2.9 seconds, but there is no information that what happened exactly. So in the success case, you want to receive the message, the detailed message actually, right? But it's still giving you some message how much time it has been taken. But in the fail case, you will receive the detailed exception, right? Why it failed. Okay, now this is one unit test that you have written. But actually, as per the practice, this is not the right. I won't say this is not the right, but let's go for the best practices. Because whenever you are writing a unit test, you have to make sure you are covering all the possible use case for your method, for the test case. The way, think about the QA. When QA is going to test your application, to make sure the password is strong, password has special character, what they will do, they are not just going to provide only one input, they will try to break your application, right? So think in that way, how many test cases you can cover, and according to that write down all the test cases, right? So that means positive test cases and negative test cases. This test case that you have written is positive test case. What about negative test case, right? So, but if you go on the name, this name is not giving you a clear picture that this test that you have written is doing what. Is it covering the positive test case or negative test case? Until you read the logic, right? From here you will understand that this is a positive test case, but actually this should not happen that way. From the method name, everyone should get idea that what this method does, right? Now if I say like this positive, now everyone know that this is a positive test case. Okay, now I wanted to write negative test case also. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's copy this whole fact, copy it, paste it, right? And what I have to do, I have to say negative. Okay, come on, here you go. Okay, negative is fine here. Now here what I will do, I will try to break my application. So break the application by giving the input which is not accepted by that validator. Now here instead of true, what I will say? I will say false. Okay, now always remember, when I say negative test case, that doesn't mean that your unit test will throw the exception. No, you should handle that test case, that if someone will provide a value which is not accepted, in that case what is the expected result, right? Here if someone will add a wrong input, like without special character, your method is going to return the false that you know. Now you will check against that false, assert.false. Now if I put a breakpoint here, let's say debug one more time for the negative test case. So how this right click debug work. Whatever method you wanted to debug, over there, go there and right click there and then debug or run. Then only it will run that particular area. So you see, we only wanted to debug this method. That's why I clicked here, right click and then said debug test case, right? So once that is in the debug mode, you will see these options are disabled, right? Okay, now let's see what was the expected result. Expected result was for sure false, but the actual result is false. That means you have covered the negative test case as well, and your test case is pass. If I say continue, you will see somewhere, here you go, the green message. That means it is fine. Okay, now we have covered positive test case, you have covered negative test case. In this case, I have written only two test cases, right? Positive and negative. But it is possible that you have multiple positive test case, you have multiple negative test case. For example, what if you don't add any value over here? What will happen in that case, right? It should throw some exception. So in that case, you can again write one more method, and you will say, just copy this. Let's paste it here, and you say, negative, or you can say when input is empty, right, and underscore negative. So this is one more approach. You can write your test cases, right, and close it. Now why you have to do this, how many methods you will create, right? If there are 10 different test cases, you can't go and create 10 different methods. For sure you can do that, right? But there is one more way. So that is a limitation of fact. The fact will only allow to test only one specific use case, right? That is why fact was introduced, when you want to test only one use case. Overcome this situation, this fact situation, there is a birth of theory. So here you go, this theory that you see, right? Now theory allows you to test all the possible use cases, whether it's 10, whether it's 2, whether it's 50 or 100, all together inside one method, right? This is where you can use. For example, you have 3 test cases. Now you don't need to write 3 different methods. If you use theory, you can cover all those 3 scenarios in one method, right? Okay, now you see, this is what I have talked. So in the theory, you have inline data. Now what inline data is? So within the inline data, you can pass the input parameter and then expected result, right? Now here, my input result was just a string. So I said string, right? And my expected result is true. Here, this is my input and I'm expecting false result. And the third test case, when there is no input, what would be the result, right? Let's go ahead and debug this as well, so I can show you the result, how this theory and inline data work, right? Debug test, and let's see. I'm going to talk about, what inline data, and one more thing that, that is more interesting. But let's see the result first. Okay, it is done. You see, before it was in the debugging mode, now it is stopped. That is how I know it is working fine. If I click here on the test pass, you will see 3 test pass, right? And time taken only 7 milliseconds because we were not in the debug mode. Okay, so all these 3 test cases pass. Okay, now this is fine, right? Whether you have 3 or 4 or 6, you can write as many as test cases. There is no problem. But we had only in this case just one input parameter, which is string. What if you complete a model, right? And that model has 10 different parameters. That would be a little hard to declare all those models here, right? Like new, and then assign that model name, right? And you have to assign like this. That will that won't look that. In that case, your code won't look clean, right? It would be hard for developers to read what has been written, right? And your code will look dirty. So there is a born of MemberData. What MemberData is? MemberData says you don't need to write everything inline in the same class. What you can do? You can create your separate class. All of this data that you need, put those data inside that class and call that class here. And that is something called concept of fixture. Okay, so what we have done here, if I go to Solution Explorer, over here, somewhere here, see, I have created one folder called fixture. And here, what I have done, I have created that class validate password test cases underscore fixture, right? Now if you see, we had needed, a one string password that I have declared here, right? The name would be, the name of the test case, what I am going to write. For example, if you see over here, we were specifying by the method name that what is the test case, right? Not here, you see, this is a negative test case, and what will be the case like this. This is other case, this is other case. So that is why, but since here, we have only one method, right, in the theory, and from that, we have to also identify which test case was written. So this name is going to help us. Okay, now let's go back. Okay, so let's understand member data, right? In the inline, we had only, one input parameter, right, and one expected result. Over here in the member data, so if you mouse over here, you will see there are two input parameter it needed, right? First parameter is what would be the member name. Second would be what would be the parameters, right? Parameters would be all of your input parameters. Now if I go over here, test data, so, and if you notice, mouse over here again, and you will see this is object, right? So that is why we have created one static object. Again, let's mouse over, you will see somewhere here it says it should be static property, static field, and blah, right? So that is why we have created one static two-dimensional array, right? Now whatever we have done here, like this, we are going to set over there. Okay, let's go ahead and set three different test cases. What all we have to do, let's say, I'm going to set my new object, right? Yeah, come on, this is my array, not this. Yeah, this is my array. Now I'm going to create object of this. Okay, here you go. Okay, so first of all, what would be my test cases? Okay, so what should be my test cases? Let's go back, and what is first is a positive test case, and I will say here, let's go back, and I will say when input password, let's say password is valid, right? And I will say this is positive, right? So I messed the spells, so this is positive. Okay, that is fine. Now the second, we have to set the password, right? And what I will say, the password is, let's copy this value, this value here. Okay, now I will say what is the expected result. So in this case, the expected result is true. Okay, let's copy this, here you go. So this is my first test case. Now I need two additional test cases. So what I will do, let's save some time and copy this. I will say this is my new object, right? Okay, now here the second case is what? When the password is not valid. Okay, let's go ahead and say when password input is not valid. Okay, and this would be your negative test case. Fine. And here what you will do, you will add this password here. Here you go, here. I hope I have written something right. Yes, this is password, right? Okay, now let's say the expected result is false, I believe. Yes, I think so. Let's see. Yep, this is false. Okay, now let's see, let's add third test case also, and I will say comma, copy paste. No, I don't need to debug. Okay, copy paste. And what is the third test case? When is empty. So I will say when input password is empty. Okay, let's say empty. Okay, and this is also an active test case, and the expected result is for sure it should be false, right? It should be false. Okay, so this is fine. Okay, now this test data is ready. You can name it anything, right? Because this is my test data, that is why I have named it test data. And this is something, standard word also, that whenever you go for unit test, you will see inside fixture people are writing test data for better understanding, for better naming convention. Okay, now this is ready. Let's go there. Now here it would be different, right? So you will see we are expecting as an input that complete class test fixture, right? This class, right? And from this fixture, what we are doing, instead of hard coding this input parameter from inline or something hard coding, what we are doing, we are saying fixture.password, this one. You see fixture.password, right? fixture.password is done, and on top of that we are saying that the expected result, what would be the expected result, we are setting here, and the actual result, this method is returning are equal or not, right? Even if mouse over here, you will see the first parameter is expected, then second parameter is actual, right? So this assert says if actual and expected are same or not, right? Now let's do one thing. Let's put a breakpoint here, debug this, let's say debug test, okay, and we will see how it works right behind the scene. So the expected result is, it should be the first input parameter, this should be the name, this should be the password, and this should be the expected result, right? So let's see what is the password here. This is password, right? The same password, here you go, right? And name we are not calling here. So expected result was what? Expected result was true, right? And actual result is true. So this should pass. The first test case pass. Okay, now go ahead and let's say second test case. This is this, right? And sign of exclamation. So expected result is false and actual result is false. So it should pass. Oh, second test case also passed. Now let's see the third test case. So third test case also should pass, right? Because this was empty. Oh, we are still not here. So this is not yet third. I think we messed up something. Let's go back. Go here. Did we? Oh man, we didn't clear, right? So that is why we saw the same thing. Okay. Now let's do one more time debug, and I will just skip quickly. So debug it. Okay. So it is debugging, and I'm going to hit the debugger, and I will directly show you the third. Okay. First one is fine, second one is fine, and now we are on the third one. You see the password is empty and this is also passed, right? Now how to debug when in this case when something will fail. Let's say we pass something that wrong expected result, that here we know that it should be false, but what happened, someone has made some change over here, or we mistakenly added some wrong expected result. Then in that case, how we are going to debug? Okay, so let me stop this. Let's just, this time I'm going to run no debug, right? Let's say run test, and we will see without any debug. So let's focus on the message. Oh, here you go. You see, it was green before and it failed this time. So if I click over here, you see 2 test case pass, 1 failed, right? And then again, it will give you whole detail this time. The result for this is this, and this is how the third test case failed, right? And again, all those details. So if if this window give you a clear picture what test case failed, for what reason, then that is fine. But normally what I do, right, because it is easy, you have just 3 test cases, but in normal project I have seen we have more than 10, more than 20 test cases in one theory. So what we can do, when you have clear picture what line or what thing had failed, you can comment rest of the thing, and you can debug only that part, right? So that will help you to and save some time because when it is looping through all those theory, right? So it will loop only for this, and it would be easy for you to debug that code. Okay, now we have covered this as well, theory. Okay, what member data and what inline? So if you wanted to understand and want to remember this concept, go into CSS time. When you are writing a CSS, right, when you are writing an HTML project, you know that something you can do inline style sheet. Within HTML you can say style equal to this and that. Same thing here, you can pass inline data within the same class. But the good practice is what, when you are working over a big application, they say write down separate CSS classes. So same concept here, write down separate data, not inline data, right? And that is something called member data. So that is how you're not going to forget that concept. Okay, now one important thing you need to remember about unit test, that you should never perform test on the database or any resource, maybe printer, maybe file. You should not call actual resource. If you do that, that means it is no more unit test. That is something called integration test. In the unit test, you only test your logic without making any call to any third-party API, for example, Google API, Facebook API, or any other API that even that you have written, or any of the server, right? Okay, now how to handle that. Let's imagine, go to that password validator again, and let me show you that real use case. If I go over here, let's say this unit test, right? This unit test was very small, and that is why we had no issue writing unit test. What if there was one more method? Let's say public, and I will say it is returning string, and let's say make a db call or anything, right? Any method. So this is db call, and it was, let's say it is expecting one input parameter. I would say it is expecting string, and let's say an input parameter, right? And that is fine, and let's say return anything from here. Just to understand the concept, let's say whatever it is getting, so input, and let's say result and return, doesn't matter. I'm just focusing on the concept. So over here, pretend that this method is making database call. Okay, now this method is being called here. Here you go. Let's say if make db call has this test argument, right? And name is wrong. Let's rename it. Should be make. Okay, and if I say if it has any value, so if it is making a database call and it is successful, or maybe it is returning something, then only go further. So what will happen now? So here you go. Okay, and then I will say come on and say return, otherwise false. Now I said in the unit test you don't make database call, but this method is calling database. So what you will do? So to skip this process, there is something called mock. In the unit test there is a concept of mock, right? So if I can go back, here's something I have already written a logic called for mocking. So if I uncomment this code, you will see this mock, M-O-C-K, right? And it comes under MOQ namespace, right? So the name is mock. Over here you can mock that. Mock is something you are faking. You are not making actual thing, you are just faking something. So what I'm doing here, I'm mocking that password validator now. And what I will do, I'm saying this setup. I'm setting up one fake service, right? For this password validator, one fake service. That is why it is called setup. So what I've done, I'm saying, hey, mock my class, right? And this is object name of that mock. And right, I'm creating object, and I'm saying then setup. When I say setup, this is going to set up all those fake things. Now here I'm saying first that make a db call, and then this return, this is very important. This return say because make db call was returning something. If I go back there, make db call, I think I messed up. Let's copy paste this name again. Oh, this is failing because I have not passed any input parameter, because it is expecting one input parameter. That is why it is giving me that error that it needs one input parameter. But let's go over there. So in the setup you have to say that this is my method, and whenever someone from this code, whenever there is a call to make db call, don't make call to this method, right? Whenever there is a call to this method, this make db call, it will not make call to this method. Why? Because of this mock. That is why it is important. And what it will do instead, we know that make db call is returning string, so I'm saying return just this string, or as per your need you can return some string, but it could be anything, right? As per your logic. So you don't have an input parameter, you can leave it empty. But if you have an input parameter, in this case I have string, so what I will do, I will say it, this is a keyword that we need, it dot, and you have to say is any, right? And say is any, and then you will say what it is. I'm saying string, and then this is method. Here you go, right? So I'm saying make db call, it has any input. That is why it says is any, right? Any sort of string you can pass, doesn't matter, it will always return this test. And that is how you are faking the service, right? And then what will happen, whenever this will act on this is valid, it will go here, it will come here, it will not make a call to this method. Instead it will from here it will return something, this test. And that is how it will know that this method is not empty. and then it will validate the logic, right? It's not just because it was database call, that is why we have made a mock, but also remember, unit test is a small piece of code testing. So if you are making a second or third method within your method, that method, which method you are testing, always mock those methods, because it is possible that second or third method is making call to database or any external service. So always mock that call. If there is other method, for example, let's see, I'm not going to create a method, but let's see, there is one more method before this method, and I will say void, there was one more method, I will say test method was there, right? So if there was one more method and it has some written logic, I will again mock that as well. Over here I will set up a service that I already have, and I will say setup. Here I will say that test method name, right? It don't need any input parameter, so I don't need anything. If there was returning something, maybe a model or maybe something, I will return here, right? That is how I will mock that method as well. So this is very important, right? I'm again repeating that in the unit test, you test only that particular method. If in that method you are calling more methods, always mock that method. In that test, if you are making any database call, even over here, mock that part. But never call any external services, never call any other method other than this, right? That is how you are making sure you are doing a unit test. Okay, now this is fine. So what? Since this logic was changed, right? Now let's imagine you jump to this project, you have made this logic because you have been asked that, hey, make a database call over here before this and, do your work. And you did that. But did you break the existing logic? I think you did. Now how you will make sure, that existing logic was broken or not? Now there is a way. So there is something called Test Explorer. One way, for sure, if there is only one part, one test class, you can go there and manually run each of the unit tests. But, go to Test Explorer, go here, right? Find your, that library, right click and say run. Okay. Once you do run, it will give you complete result, what pass, what fail. Now here you see these test cases pass, but these test case fail. That means you have impacted something. Now what you will do? You will read the error message. Now you will investigate that, you are breaking the changes. Now what other changes that you need to make, right? Either you will revert this change or you will fix in a way that it is not impacting the other part of your code. But it is not always necessary that you have broke the logic. Also possible that business logic is completely changed. Now that means once the business logic is changed, you need to update those test cases also. Test cases could fail in two different cases. One, if your logic is impacting other logics. Second, if business logic was updated, now those unit tests, the old unit tests are outdated, right? So these are the two different use case. Other thing, there is a concept of blue-green deployment. So when you are writing a unit test, remember one more thing. Writing unit test case does not mean that your application is bug-free. If you have not written a good test cases, you have just did formality because I have to write unit test, that is why I'm writing unit test. That means you are not making sure that your application is bug-free. Going to help in future whenever a new team member join your team, and this test case will help him or her to know that he or she is taking old logics or not. So focus on writing good test cases. Okay, so now how you can automate this? So there is a concept of blue-green deployment, and in one of my previous video I have created already. So if you go over here on the channel, you will see can we write a code without a bug, right? So over here I have explained how we can write a bug-free code, and this is one of the important part that making sure your application is near to bug-free when you are writing unit tests. And over here you will see sometime when you are working for enterprise application, it is possible that you don't have any UI, right? So how you will test that? Then unit test will help you to test your logic, right? If you see here, we have this application is not Angular project, not window form. I don't have any UI to test. and this is just a class library. Even I don't have any API, right? I'm just writing a DLL that I'm going to provide to some other team. They are just going to consume that DLL and then they are going to test. Then in that case, how I will test my logics, right? So unit test is going to help here. Is it really going to save developers time? Now you know the answer, that it is really going to save the time. Initially, when you are writing this code, this unit test, yes, I understand, I'm with you that this looks little burden on the developers. But now when you have thousands of projects and if you have a good amount of unit test, it is going to save lot of developers time, and you don't need to test whole application. You just have to test your unit, and if everything is green, that this application is good, right? Okay, so that's all for today's video. I will see you in the next video.